Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Men After God podcast. I'm excited to have my friend Tim here with me. And Tim has got an amazing story. He has literally traveled the globe in service to Jesus. He has committed his life fully over to him, is pastoring a church now, and has an amazing following on Facebook because of what he is able to do with food. And he's also from God's country down there in Tennessee. So we're definitely got a connection there. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the Tennessee Vols, but I'm sure we could pull that conversation up as we get into it today. So make sure you're sitting back, relaxing, or maybe you're working and wanting to listen to some valuable content from someone who loves God, who loves others, and has dedicated his life over to him. And maybe we'll even get a nice recipe or two out of the conversation. But without further ado, let me introduce my friend Tim. Tim, thanks for being on the podcast, my friend.
Hey, it's very much a pleasure to be on this podcast with you and see what the Lord kind of unearths through these conversations that we have, and a little bit about my backstory and learning what God did in and through all of the highs and lows, the peaks, the valleys, the days where I wondered what was going to happen next. I'm really thankful for where I am and where God brought me, what He brought me out of.
Amen. Yeah, he's done a lot in your life, and it's just so amazing to see how you were able to persevere through those things. You've used it for God's glory, and you're continuing to use it for His glory. And even as you get more of a public platform, before we go any further, I'm going to mention it right here at the beginning. Tim was able to be on a show. Now, I may say it wrong, Tim, so I'll let you say the show. But go ahead and just tell them what you can about the show. It comes out in about a week from the release of this podcast.
Yes, so I had the privilege to be on Next Level Chef, which is headed up by Gordon Ramsay, and he's taken on a couple other celebrity chefs named Richard Blaze. I'm getting their names right. I don't want to butcher their names. Thank goodness. Richard Blaze and Naisha Arrington. Yeah. So the three of them teamed up to put on a show called Next Level Chef, where they invite chefs from all over America, of home cooks, pro cooks and social media cooks. Yeah. And so I was invited to be a part of the show, went through a rigorous interview process, and out of, the numbers they gave me, they had 5,000 applications. They narrowed it down to 2,000. And then from 2,000 or so, it, got narrowed down to, I think, around 400. And then the pool narrowed down to the 24 that they selected to be a part of the show when it started, which was, I don't know, that's kind of cool to me. But nonetheless, January 28th, right after the big football game, I will be on Next Level Chef on Fox Television competing. Can't say how I did, whether I was booted on the second round, third round. I won it all. I can't really say, but I encourage you to tune in on Fox January the 28th, or on the next day. You can catch it on Hulu.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to be watching that episode. And guys, I'm going to encourage you to go out and watch that. Support Tim and what he did there, and just get to know him a little more, I'm sure, and some of the food he cooked. Tim, I was looking at your cookbook, man, and I pulled that up just a second ago. And it's called Family Table Favorites by Chef Tim Clowers. And we'll talk more about the book in a minute. But what I want to just appreciate is, I saw two things in there that just made me want to buy it. And the first one was in the dessert section, banana pudding. All right, just throw it out there. You got a banana pudding recipe, so I'm excited to try it. I'm going to judge you on it, just so you know. All right, that's going to happen.
Well received too.
Yeah, and then I saw a biscuit and gravy casserole. Oh. I
mean, what can I say? I live in the South, and both of those are nothing but comfort food.
Absolutely, my friend. I'm in Bristol, Connecticut now, and up here in New England, they just don't have food like that. And so I can't wait to grab your book. I'm going to get it up here. Judge your banana pudding, because that's just my dessert. I love it. And then I'll make that biscuit gravy casserole for some friends, and we'll definitely enjoy that. Introduce some of that good Southern cooking to these New Englanders up here. Man. Well, listen, so let's talk a little bit about you. So you've got an awesome family, great kids, and a great story there. where you're a blended family. And guys, I came from you call it a broken home. My parents got divorced before I went into second grade, and so I had a blended family as well. And Tim, you said it, like a blended family, it's not easy. Like, no marriage is, but it puts an extra layer on there. So let's hear some of your story about your wife and your kids, and just how God's worked as you all have grown together with Him and brought you through things up to this point.
Sure. The first thing I guess I want to say is, the life I'm living right now, I can't express how much gratitude that I have, because I should be dead, to be honest with you. I should be under the earth physically. I should have already been dead, held to gunpoint, addiction, overdoses, and that all started. We didn't even talk about it in the beginning, but it happened in the early 80s. My dad was pastoring a church in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my brother that was in between me and my oldest brother. I was 14 at the time. He was 15, going on 16, about to turn 16. And so he was working in the church that summer just to earn extra money. He wanted to buy a car. He was about to turn 16, I think in November. This was in August. And he's under the stage, literally pulling out equipment for a big seminar, or a big, back in those days, they called it camp meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. In the South, did y'all put hay bales out, or was that just reserved for the special times?
Sometimes we did, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Been in those.
So he's crawling under the stage, getting out some of the gear, and he touched something, which was ductwork that wasn't properly ground, and he was electrocuted and killed instantly.
Oh, my goodness.
And I didn't share that with you. It just kind of slipped my mind. But that right there was a catalyst event that took place in my life, is what drove me to question God. How could you let something like that, a big event, how could you let it take place where people come to worship you?
Wow.
And it took me years to get through that issue, that it's just a building. The people are the church.
Yeah.
They come together in a building, and it doesn't really legitimize a replication of God. Now, it honors Him when we go to that place of worship. And I had a hard time with that. I'm just going to be honest with you. And that's where I needed something to cover the pain that I was feeling. And it literally started 6 months after my brother died. And it didn't stop until I was 28 or 27 years old. It happened in 1997. Just those 14 years of, I was existing. I wasn't thriving. I was existing. And drugs, alcohol. I was an addict in every sense of the matter. And, that's a whole different podcast, I could tell you about all those experiences. And then, I don't know. What happened was I got fired at a job I was working at in Dallas, Texas. I'd moved to Texas, and I just knew that there was a special event going on in my dad's church, and I decided, you know what, my life, pardon my language here, but my life kind of sucks right now. So I'm just going to go to church.
I'm just going to let you know, I've never had anyone say, like, pardon my language real quick. I was a little scared of what was about to come out, but if sucks is the worst we get, we're okay today, guys. We're good. We don't have to edit that one out.
We're good.
Yeah, we're all right.
And so that night, I met God for the very first time in my life. And even though I'd been been around church most of my life, and then you fast forward all those years later, I went through a divorce. It was painful. It really was. It was a challenge. And so my wife left me in 2012. And then my current wife, Jackie, who's an amazing human being, one of the most giving persons that I've ever met in my entire life. And so we connected. Like, it's kind of the story I didn't even tell you. So I'm on a mission trip
come on.
in June of 24 in Moldova. I don't know if you know where Moldova is, but it's right there nestled between the Ukraine and Russia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm on a missions trip there with my dad, because I'm still reeling from my divorce. I've been divorced for 2 years and not really pursuing any relationships, just trying to be a single dad, a good single dad parent. And my dad asked me to go. I wasn't speaking. I wasn't doing much in ministry wise. And I went on the trip, and I met, I got connected with her pastor, my wife's current pastor, who lives here. And I knew him. We'd been on trips together before, but we just started having a conversation when we were there. And we were talking about having selfies. Selfies were popular, starting to starting to get popular in 2014. And I held up my phone to him and I said, "Doesn't she belong to you?" Which was my wife. I showed him an image of her. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, you know, Tim, that's an interesting story." I'm like, "Oh." So he tells me a story of how her husband was killed tragically in a car accident.
Oh, my goodness.
About 2.5 years prior to this conversation, and tell me her story of restoration of what she went through. Husband killed in a car accident, 3 kids, a single mom. And then he starts telling me the story and how she's done well and started a business. And then my lightning fast mind started, oh, wait, she's very pretty and she's single then.
Hey, I can imagine that any other man listening to this right now would have been going in the same direction.
And so long end of it is we had more conversations, me and her pastor, and he brought her up the next day in conversation while we're in Moldova on a missions trip. And then I brought it up the next day. And then you fast forward, we got connected and we knew each other because there was some connection over the years. Yeah. She knew me, I knew her. We had brief interaction because of business involvement of what we were doing. But it just worked out that we met up. I started traveling. It was a long distance. I was in Texas. She was in Tennessee, and it was long distance. I would go back and forth about every 2 to 3 weeks. We'd have long phone calls, long FaceTimes. And I just knew in my spirit for the very first time in my life that this woman can bring a lot of joy in my life. Now, I had joy without her, because I'm complete in who I was. She wasn't going to do what they say, complete me,
right?
Because God does that for me. But I just knew she could add a lot of value in my life and bring someone into my life that could help live these next, 30 to 40 years of my life and just make it full of extra joy. And I just something in me, I didn't feel that way with my first wife. I'm just being honest. She was pretty. She was very gorgeous.
Yeah.
I didn't have that real deep inner knowing that this was the person that God really had for me. And obviously she didn't plan it. I didn't plan it this way because my parents have been married for 60 years and I didn't get into my first marriage to get out.
Yeah.
And same thing with my current wife. She didn't get into her marriage to get out, but we didn't choose it. Her husband died and my wife walked away.
Yeah.
And so, we got married in January of 2015. She has 3 kids. I have 2 kids. At that time, they were ages 8 to 18. There were 4 living at home. The oldest had went to college here locally at the University of Tennessee. Go Vols, by the way.
Yeah, hey, yes, that's right. Next year is going to be great. Nico at quarterback. Hopefully he can actually throw the short ball. Man, I can get distracted on this conversation. You better start talking again.
So. Well, being as something your roots are here, so I'm feeling the vibe totally.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was the first couple of years. I'm not going to lie, were a challenge because you're blending mindsets, you're blending personalities. Her daughter was away at college, not away, but not living at home, living on campus, and it did make that part of it easier. But she had 2 boys. I had a son and a daughter. We're all living under the same roof all of a sudden, and we come from way different backgrounds and
I'm sure mindsets. Parenting philosophies and everything were different. Yeah,
absolutely. And so we just made a determination. Even though those first few years were hard, we stuck to our guns, and you can't allow fear to come in and say, this isn't going to work, so we'll just separate. But we had the mindset going into this thing that we're going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah, that's great.
And so we took a vacation in 2016, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's the summer of 2016, all 7 of us, and there was a plus one by this time, a boyfriend. Okay. And we all went to the beach in Florida, our first time. I rented a beach house. We all hung out together for a full week. And one day, my wife took a walk. She took a walk on the beach by herself. And as she's walking back, nearing the house, she sees a silhouette of what looked like what she thought was me and my daughter, Caitlin, who was 9 at the time. She looked off and saw, like I said, a silhouette of what looked like me and Caitlin. And she said at that very moment, she experienced something that she had never experienced before in her life, that how God could bring something together that is broken and bring it back to a place of restoration. And God showed her Isaiah 55:13 that morning. Just somehow, some way, she read Isaiah 55:13. And there's a significance to that particular scripture, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, instead of the thorn bush will grow the juniper. And instead of the briars, the myrtle will grow. This will be the Lord's renown for an everlasting sign that you will endure forever. And so if you don't know it, juniper is in the evergreen family, and they can live in any environment, to the hot climates of the desert to as high as 15 or 18,000 feet in the Himalayas, and I can't ever get that word right, inhospitable environment. So they can grow in minus temperatures and, in excess of 120 degrees, a juniper tree. And so what that meant for her is, I'm restoring you through this process. I'm going to take away, or I'm going to restore what once was, what the scripture says, a briary patch, or even, as it says, a thorn bush, and I'll turn it into something beautiful and life-giving. And that's something that God birthed into my wife in 2016. And then 2 years later, we started our own nonprofit, because we both, from the very moment that we got married, we have always loved outreach in our city. And that's something we started in 2018, was our organization, Juniper Worldwide, because we wanted to go into the parts of our city that nobody wants to go. And that's when we started an outreach in our city. We named it Juniper Worldwide. And so what we would do is we would work at our catering company and cook a lot of food, enough to feed as much as 200 people, and go down under the bridge. People, they're homeless, they have addictions, they have mental health issues. And we just felt like that was part of our calling of what we're supposed to do. And we would just set up shop. We spend several hours cooking a full buffet meal, set up the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak, under the bridge. Wow. And, to this point, we've developed the same plan that we've been doing since 2018, and have numerous volunteers. We have, now it's expanded so much to where we have a whole clothing section to where people can get clothed. They can get hygiene kits. They can get IDs. They can get bus passes. And, God's just really done a cool thing through that process. And most all the kids are gone. We have one left at home. She's a senior in high school, and she's about to graduate. But, and I know I said a lot, but during that 9.5 years or 8.5 years we've been married, it's not been easy.
Right. Yeah.
It's not been easy, but you have to commit and stay committed to the process. And, in church, we launched a church, and we can talk a little bit more about that in 2022. And that just added a whole new level of stress to the relationship.
Yeah, I feel that one, man. What were you just sitting around like, you know what? I know what I want to do today. Let's just launch a church. I got nothing else going on. Oh, man. Well, let's pause for just a second. Let me jump back here. And so you talked about the blended family and stuff. If you don't mind sharing, what would you say was one of your, you call it a greatest struggle, or what was one of the things you remember most having to work through in those early years of a blended family to help it be successful?
Oh, wow. Oh, man, you can't get your feelings hurt.
Okay.
One of my big struggles was my wife and I both are very generous people. We do our best to always model what Jesus gave us. He wanted us to model generosity, because if you look at scripture, and I know this is not a Bible lesson, but in the Old Testament, They talk a lot about the tithe and giving 10% and then giving offerings. Well, if you fast forward to the new covenant of how things changed when Jesus arrived on the scene, he didn't really talk about the tithe that much, because that already been established back in the old covenant. So why do I need to keep talking about the tithe when it's, if you will a man rob God? I mean,
right. You already know this. Why do we need to talk about it again? Right there with you.
He didn't talk about it enough. What
launching
he
point for giving
was generosity. So all through the New Testament, you read a lot more about being generous. And I looked at it. there's so many more scriptures in the Bible as a whole that reference generosity more than it does prayer. It's like that astounded me. But the big thing that helped me in this process was our first year. I knew it was going to be weird at Christmas. It just was. Just I got my 2 kids. She's got her 3 kids, and we're all trying to figure out how this kind of works and can we get along? And they all got along for the most part. They really did. And once the oldest boy left to go to the Army, and then eventually the one after that left, and then mine left, and then now we're at this place. But the biggest thing that helped me was to not get my feelings hurt.
And now, do you mean from your stepchildren or your wife?
The stepchildren.
Yeah. Okay.
And you just can't get your feelings hurt. You can't take things too personal because, and let me explain what I mean by that is, so the second Christmas that we had together. So by this time, me and my wife were married. Our incomes are the same. We're equal partners. I give, we're just one house.
Yeah.
And so, my wife has a list. She got a bunch of Christmas presents for all the kids. I think we spent $200 or $300 per kid for 5 kids, and I remember we're sitting there under the tree, or not under the tree, but we're sitting in front of the tree on Christmas, and everybody opens up their gifts. Her 3 kids open the gifts and they say, "Thanks, Mom." They give her a hug, and I'm right there, and I'm just kind of an afterthought. I don't get acknowledged. I don't get a thank you. I don't get a hug. Nothing from her kids. And this goes on for about 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And so finally, after, I guess, right around 2019, I finally settled in myself, okay, you're not going to get a thank you. You're not going to get a hug, even though you paid for all this. Maybe you didn't actually go buy it, or some you did buy. Right. And so I finally settled that I'm not going to get my feelings hurt. If I don't get a hug, it's okay. I still love them anyway. Yeah. And that's the way it's been. And so, now it's changed. They do say thank you. They do hug me. And I was listening to a podcast, I guess about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years, as long as 5 years ago, that says when you blend families, it takes about 7 years for mindsets and personalities and for everybody to understand one another, how it takes that long for you to bond together.
Wow. I never would have thought it took that long, but it makes sense, I guess. My stepdad came into my life in like 6th grade or so. So like I had until I graduated high school, and then finally it was like, oh, okay, we're good. I went to the Marine Corps after that. So, but wow, 7 years. Okay. All right. So that was,
it was a big learning curve for me to not get my feelings hurt and don't ever take things personal because, my daughter was young enough to where her mother's not in her life at all. So that made the part of our blending family part easier. There's not a second parent to we got to split time with. And then her husband passed away. So her kids' father is not around. And so I just began to develop trust with her kids. I loved them. I didn't get my feelings hurt. Now, I did get my feelings hurt, but I never showed it.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
You know what I mean? On those Christmas days, I never would show it. And when they didn't say bye to me, or they don't hug me, or they don't acknowledge me when I'm in the room, I just chose to not let that affect me and to not let it affect me being able to love them. And so you fast forward 9.5 years later, whatever the time frame is now they buy me gifts for Father's Day.
Oh, wow.
And it really did take about 7 years.
Wow. And you came into a situation where, your wife had walked away, but their dad and your current wife's husband, he passed away unexpectedly and tragically. So, there's grief, there's hurt there, there's, oh man. And then you're coming into this role, and that would have been difficult. but it's great that you made that decision. I love that counsel. And so any guys out there with blended families, you just heard a great piece of value to take into that. Love them with your feelings hurt is how I would summarize that. That's really good.
Yeah, you have to.
So Tim, you've Juniper Worldwide, parachurch organization, leads to the planning of a church because, why not? Yeah. And then, and now you guys are there, you're pastoring the church, things are going well. And then Chef Tim comes along. Now, have you always been a chef, culinary person? Or did this just kind of come out of nowhere?
I've always been involved in food. So my mom or my grandmother was born and raised in Italy.
Oh, wow.
So as a child growing up, my grandmother, she would come stay with us for about 6 weeks out of the year. And also every winter, usually for Christmas, we would go up there where she lived up in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. But she migrated to Canada, from what I understand, is when she was in her late teens. And so, which I think would be sometime in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So she migrated to Canada. And so the only thing I knew was grandmas, moms, they were always in the kitchen cooking, and usually it was Italian food. And that was immersed into my thinking. Now, I didn't cook a lot when I was little. It really didn't start until I was in my later teen years, like around 19 or 20. But you kind of get that mindset. Like I just remember as a kid growing up in high school when my grandma would come stay with us in the summers or sometimes in the spring or in the fall. It just kind of varied. I mean, I would wake up and there's my grandma sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee, and there's already stuff on the stove going.
I give it to you, man. These grandmas, like mine's the same way. I don't know how, but I'm getting up at 7:30 and they've already cooked. Like everything's ready. It's done. And then after church meals, brother, I don't know about yours, but I'm still my wife and I are still trying to figure out how did our grandmothers cook, not just for her husband and her kids, but for the grandkids and everybody else right after church. Because when we come home from after church, oh no. That is not what we want to be doing. But man, okay. So your grandmother, big influence there. And so she comes stay with you. How did you just join in with her cooking sometimes?
No, I had lots of good memories of her making pasta and just simple dishes. And sometimes they were elevated. And I just remember that. It's just, she would be in the kitchen literally the entire day. Whether I was in school, whether it was the summertime or it was the springtime. I just remember like if she was there while I was in school, I would go to school and I would come back from school, 8 hours later, and there's grandma still in the kitchen, still cooking. Yeah. Or if it was the summertime, I would get up, around 9 o'clock, being a lazy teenager, and go downstairs. There's grandma. She's cooking. I go play with my friends for 3-4 hours, come back. She's still in the kitchen.
Wow.
And my mom was somewhat of the same, so to speak. But even though she had responsibilities as being a pastor's wife, she still cooked a fair amount of time. And so that's just, I don't know, it just stuck with me. And like gnocchi, you know what gnocchi is, right?
I think I pronounce it differently, but yeah, I think so.
Gnocchi, or however.
I think I actually call it like nochi or something, like GNOCCI or something like that. Yeah. Listen, man, I'm from the area you live in. I don't English well. Okay. I tell people that all the time.
So that's something she made for me. It was a little specialty that she made. She made me a couple giant big Ziploc bags, before she left to go back to Canada, so that I had plenty that we could just sauce up and ready to go. And so I have a lot of fond memories of, kitchen and food. And even though I didn't cook when I was young, so it was just an easy transition for me to get into the restaurant business. And I was in the restaurant business for, I guess, about 10 years or so. And so, or about 12 years. And so it was just kind of in me, food. It was just easy. It came natural. I was even a server, bartender, cook, and line cook, and all that kind of stuff in the restaurant business. So it just, I don't know, things just came naturally for me in the kitchen, easy. And I just would go home. One of my things that I won't say thing, but one of the things that I guess I've always loved is going into my kitchen and opening up the refrigerator and look and see what I have, and then creating something based on what I have.
Okay.
And that was, I guess, a little skill or a gift that I have.
Yeah, I usually do that, and it turns out to be cereal. And so I'm pretty gifted at making that.
I gotcha. and that's the way that like when I go into a grocery store, I think the same way. So for example, a great recipe, great idea, help you how I think. And then we'll get into how social media happened is I'm in St. Louis the other day because we're with some friends of ours, and I walk into this world market. And the first thing that I see are some dates. They're from the Middle East, because dates over there in the desert Middle Eastern area tend to be sweeter, taste a little bit better. So I saw those and I'm like, I'm going to get some of those because I know dates from over there in the Middle Eastern part of the world are so much better. So I picked up some of those and I'm like, I can buy some oranges and I can zest the orange and then I can squeeze a little bit of the orange juice and puree that together with the figs, get some whipping cream and, heavy whipping cream, make a whipped cream, and then turn that into a fig mousse.
Oh, wow.
And so that's kind of how my brain works.
I don't think that way at all. I got to follow the instructions in your cookbook. I can't just whip that one up. That's awesome. Wow.
And so, that's kind of my gift of how I like to do things is off the cuff, and nothing ever really isn't entirely planned how I think about food. I mean, it is, but it's not, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand. So,
in March of 2021, we had been doing a Bible study. So we didn't talk about this off the podcast. My wife and I felt right after COVID happened, we felt like we knew God was doing something in us both. And we weren't sure yet about planning a church, launching a church. But what we did know is Juniper Worldwide existed already for 2 years, and that we're reaching our community through the homeless outreach that we've been doing for 3 years up to this point. And I just felt in my spirit, I says, let me start a Bible study for young people. And it ranged from ages 18 to about 25 is where it kind of capped out. And so I just started talking to all three of my boys and I said, give me so-and-so's number, if you don't mind. I'm going to text, Zach. I'm going to text Ethan. I'm going to text James, just their friends, because I had a relationship with them. And one of the things that was unique, I guess you could say, about us starting a Bible study, which is what we did. We started a Bible study for young people. And what was unique about our home and help, I guess, part of the blending come together was we always allowed our home to be a place where any one of our kids can bring their friends and they can land. And it would be a safe place. And that's one of the things I really forgot to mention. It was a really important part of our families coexisting together is any one of our children, they want to bring friends home and they're welcome. And how we did that was through food, because I'm obviously I have a background in cooking. I'm a chef by trade. And so anytime that the friends were over, they usually stayed and ate dinner. And it was kind of a funny story how it started. We were at another house when we first got married, and it was her youngest son and then my son. They each had a friend over, and it just so happened that one of the neighbor kids came over, and my wife said, "Okay, what are you cooking for dinner?" And I told her what I'm cooking. Okay, all right. Well, remember, there's 3 other kids here going to be for dinner, and I'm just used to cooking for me and my 2 kids, and just getting used to her kids, and
yeah.
And so so I made dinner, and all of a sudden it's like, oh.
There's 10 of us.
Yeah. So you guys are probably going to be hungry. And so she scrounged around and found some things together. And so from that point on, something she said to me was her mom always said to her growing up, whenever she makes baked potatoes, she always made 2 extra because you never know who might show up.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the mindset that I always adapted from then, which was back in 2015 up until now. I don't just make 1 plate. I make 3 or 4. I make way more because you just never know who's going to show up. And so through that process of learning my kids as friends, I always got to know their friends because they always just seemed to come to our house instead of their house.
Wow.
Because hey, Reese's dad or Luke's dad or Chris's dad or Caitlin's dad, man, let's go to their house. They know they can eat good at my house.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, especially if you're making gravy biscuit casserole. Good Lord. I can't wait. I can't wait to have that.
And so, that was another catalyst to where it allowed me to have influence with my sons' friends.
Yeah.
And so I just started inviting them over for a Bible study. Hey, you guys want to come and eat a huge meal and then we'll talk about Jesus?
Absolutely.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So they did. So we started a Bible study. I think it was in June or July of 2020. And I would spend about $150 to $200 and cook this big meal and feed about 12 boys in my house.
Wow.
And then we would eat for about 30 minutes and then we would talk about Jesus for 30. And then they would go home about 60 to 70 minutes later. And from that process, it just began to grow. And we got up to the point where there was 22 and 23 people in our house. Then we started co-ed a year later. My wife was doing it. And then we just, I don't know. We just knew that there was something, that God was doing through this process. And we didn't know what. And so you get to March 2021, about 9 months later of doing these Bible studies. So my oldest son and my youngest daughter and a couple of the other kids from the Bible study, they said, Dad, you should get on TikTok. They would probably like you.
Why is this?
Yeah, this is where I can let out a cuss word,
I hope you toss them a little bit every now and then, Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I just said, no, I'm not going to get on camera and dance and just shake my little hiney. And no, why would I do that? It just doesn't make sense. But none, to my knowledge, is I didn't know that the platform, because I hadn't really been on social media much.
Yeah.
These past several years leading up to that point. And I didn't realize platforms have evolved to what they were back, 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. I just said, all right, fine. So my daughter started getting her, phone, and we downloaded the TikTok app, and she was filming in the TikTok app. And, we spent about 3 weeks trying to make videos, and I got like 29 followers, and every one of those followers were everybody that we knew and people from the Bible study. And it's just, I got 100 views on this video. Yes. Whoa, I'm
celebrating. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, listen, I feel you. We just started posting for Men After God. We're doing Reels daily right now. And it was great. I was on, I think the first one we posted was like 78. I'm like, whoa, yes, 78 people I don't know. Then we had a couple of them like a few days in a row. It was like 2,000. I posted awesome. One and it got like right after that, because I'm right in the high of like, yeah, we're okay, good. We got traction, good. The next day, like the third day, 50. I'm like, okay, did something wrong there. Got it. Just going to keep moving forward, And so, but now you've went from 100 followers to like what on TikTok? You're like what, 2.5 million?
No. So on TikTok, I have 1.3 million. Okay. Facebook, I'm right at 700,000. I have a little over 250,000 on Instagram and right at 100,000 subs on YouTube.
Wow, that's awesome. That is so great. And that's actually how we found you to reach out and say, hey, I told you about Zach, and Zach, I know will listen to this podcast. He's like your biggest fan now. But that's how he found you, was like watching that. And I guess you had, I don't know if you said something or you had something, I think in a video that was just Christian oriented. And that was how he realized, like, oh, wait, this guy's a follower of Christ. And then he started really looking into you and found out, who you were, a pastor in the church and everything. And so talk to me about what it's like being a content creator with that much of a following. What's your what's been the most surprising thing for you since you got up to this level?
I would say the most surprising thing is I'm trying to, use wisdom here is.
Yeah.
It doesn't always, I thought, I guess in my head when we launched the church, I guess some of that would translate into a following.
Mm.
And I quickly realized it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess in my head, I'm thinking, well, we're launching a church. God spoke to me. I can tell you we're the place. I was walking on the sidewalk and God spoke to me and said, hey, we want you to launch Juniper Church. And, the social media is going to be a big catalyst. It's going to help. And nope, it really didn't translate, because you have to have, number one, enough followers in your city, which obviously I don't have a ton of followers from Knoxville, but obviously I have several hundred, but it doesn't always translate into social media content creation. Oh, you're going to have droves of people coming to the church. I'm like, no,
nope.
It doesn't work that way, because you're known for one thing here, and this is what you stand for. And obviously it's brought me lots of recognition, and it has brought people into the church. It has been a great blessing. However, the big thing that I've been able to really differentiate now is I'm a content creator teaching people something, and they know I love Jesus. Yeah. But my work over here with the church, I'm focused on discipling people. And my content is different, even though it's similar. It's a different style of content that I'm giving them, because I want to see people obtain the best walk with God that they possibly can. But it requires, you got to read your Bible. You got to open it up, and you have to, the Bible says that we have to obey the commandments of God. If we don't, and that's how, I guess you could say that, social media and content creation, it's so easy to consume, but yet it's easy not to do what you consume. Like I was looking at some statistics that we as humans can consume so many gigabytes of data into our brains when we download it, because a lot of it's coming digitally, some of it's coming what we read, some of it's coming from what we hear. But if we don't process it in the moment, you lose day by day, you lose 30% of your retention. Wow. So it's like a graph. If you don't take something that you've heard and that captivated your attention, the graph goes down drastically 30% per day. So therefore, the download that you got or what you consumed, you didn't retain it. And so that's the easy part about social media. You can consume and consume and consume, but what's the actual download?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, we can all relate to that, because how many people have gotten lost on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, shorts, reels, stories, whatever you want to call them, and just sitting there and, oh, look, 20 minutes just went by. I've consumed 50 cat videos, 3 cooking videos, 2 leadership videos. This talked about housing and real estate. This was business. Now you can tell what a lot of my social media is, and so you see all these things, and then you walk away like, well, I should really do something about that. And then you move on to the next part of your day, and it's all gone. Yeah. And we become very much a consumer-oriented society. And then as followers of Christ, we have to be careful, because if we're just consuming, but never living, we missed it. I saw someone post something the other day, a friend of mine out in Las Vegas, and it was basically if you can quote the entire Bible, but you don't live it, it's useless.
Oh, that's true.
And we and I'm afraid that if we're not intentional as pastors and as just men after God to share with our families, our friends, and those around us in our communities, the importance of not consuming the Bible like it's another piece of content. Right. And whether that, obviously it's not video based, but as if it's just another book, if it's just another novel, if we aren't careful, we can begin to, and this was happening prior to social media, but we can begin to just read it like it's a regular book, and not like, wait a minute, this is God's word. This is supposed to be applicable to my life, and making decisions in the moment of, what am I going to take away from this right now and live to be more like Jesus? But I love social media. It's a great avenue to get the gospel out and to have fun with. And I think you said it great. You're a pastor here helping people grow closer to Christ. You're a follower of Jesus that helps people learn to cook. And, there's division. There's not. You're the same person, understand. But you can use both outlets to point people to Christ. And I think that's awesome. I absolutely love it. What's been your favorite thing about becoming Chef Tim with the blow up on social media and the content creation? What's your favorite thing about it?
Gosh, I guess probably some of the doors and that it's open for me to do that I've never been able to do, and then some of the experiences that I've been able to have. Just some fun experiences, attending certain events. Obviously, I get recognized. There's a little, fangirling and fanboying, but honestly, I'm just a humble guy. I'm just a country boy that lives in East Tennessee, and I just don't see myself as that kind of, like a star, or I don't. I mean, some people see me that way, but I get requests for autographs, quite often, or I want to meet you. I get that all the time. But honestly, I mean, I'm just a dude, man.
I'm just a guy.
I just happen to love Jesus. I really do. I'm passionate about Christ. I want to see people really follow the commands of Scripture and become a great dad, become a great husband, become, the best godly character driven person that you can be, and that you will be one of those people that you're not being hateful on social media because you didn't get what you wanted, so to speak, what I mean? It's just, because it's easy to get pulled into pornography through social media. It's easy to get pulled into sin through social media. And here's the cool thing that I guess a lot of people don't know about me. I'm actually not on social media.
Uh-oh. Hang on now. Revealing secrets. I don't think you could say that, Tim.
So I'm on social media, but I'm not, if that makes sense. So I've developed a discipline in myself that I don't really get on social media and scroll.
Oh, there you go.
If that makes sense.
We could all use that discipline.
So I typically, I have routines of how I do things. I try to proportion time so that I could catch up on any trends, follow certain people that I need to check out their videos and make comments that are my social media friends that I made through, Gordon Ramsay's show, Next Level Chef, through all of the different competitions and cooking things that I've done over the last 3 years. Yeah, I do get on there and comment, watch their video, like it, but I'm not really on social media because I get on there and I go to either Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. I go straight to my video and I make comments. So I'm not really on social media scrolling, consuming content. I'm actually doing a job.
Yeah.
Because I need to respond to people. I need to respond to my community. And a lot of people, hey, did you see this? No, I didn't see it. Didn't see it. I'm just, it's so in one sense you can say it's my job, so to speak, to be on social media, but it's not. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. No. And I think that discipline you talked about there is just beneficial for all of us. There's not a single guy I know out there that doesn't from time to time deal with, overconsumption of social media, and then it can translate over to anything. But I love that, you've got, I think in total, around 2 million followers, subscribers based on all of the channels you mentioned there. And you're not the guy just sitting there doing it. You're the one, you're working it. It's your job. And I'm curious if the rest of us would take a moment and say, like, what if we looked at this as a job or as a means of like Jesus calling us to utilize this platform for a purpose rather than just solely entertainment and consumption? What type of impact could Christians have if we went that direction? And it wouldn't have to be all, preaching Bible verses, prayer and things, which are not bad things. But if people just dove into like what they're good at, what they enjoy doing, filmed it and started talking to people and let them know, I follow Jesus. What type of relationships could we build for that? Because you hit on something there that plagued me when I first started pastoring. I remember first 6-7 months of pastoring, because I got here July 2019. So 7 months in COVID, but during that time frame, I remember praying, asking God, how am I supposed to reach people that don't know you when the only people I spend my time around are people who already follow you? Now, there's the responsibility of discipleship there, but there's also a responsibility of evangelism and sharing the gospel. And I think what you've done is found a great outlet as a pastor, at least, to be able to interact with others that don't know Jesus and show them that love whenever you get the opportunity to, and God opens the doors. I love it. I love what you're doing there, man.
Thank you.
So if you had any advice, we'll close out with this. any advice to a young man who's either, you mentioned divorce, going through something like that, or in a blended family, whichever direction you feel led to go here, what would just some things you would say to him to help him just maintain his faith in Christ? Because I know it could get rocked through a divorce and then be challenged with a blended family and things. Like, what is like a great piece of advice you would give to a young man who's potentially going through something similar to that?
The first thing that I would say, obviously, number one, you really need to find a church community.
Yeah.
You've got to find a church that you can connect to, because one of the things about the church is it's a community, and God said that He brought Jesus for a reason to the earth. Okay, He did that for a purpose, and that obviously was to help establish His church, which was to replace Him, which is the bride of Christ, which was His church. Mm-hmm. And through the church is how we can build relationships, and how we can build a deeper walk with God. Because when we're on our own, trying to do it all by ourselves, mm-hmm. When we're faced with that very moment of maybe my wife just left me, or this relationship just walked out on me, it just ended, or you're in the midst of a challenging situation in a blended family you find yourself in, is because, or not because of you, but what we need is relationships that will help us when we're getting ready to pick up that phone and, oh man, that looks so much better because it brings pleasure to my brain. I can look at pornography, or I can go somewhere. It's pleasuring my brain so that I don't have to think about the pain that I'm actually physically feeling emotionally, that's affecting me physically. But yet, instead of going to that, we've got a relationship that we can build. And that's the biggest part of what I've seen in men over these last number of years, is there's no long-term accountable relationships that they can call on. And I am extremely blessed. I can't begin to fathom the depths of how grateful I am. And I can honestly say that I truly have 3 great longtime friends that have been in my life for 32 years.
Wow.
And it's said, Jim Collins, John Maxwell, they both say it, at the end of your life, if you have found 2 great friends by the time you're towards the end of your life, if you have found 2 great lifelong friends, you have found great relationships. And in knowing what the church can help provide for us. But, it's like we have to make the effort. We don't just sit on the back row, come in once a month or twice a month. And we have to engage. We have to read the word. We have to do what the word says. We have to engage and connect with people. Now, the church has got to do its job, making connectability there. Right. You can't just sit back and do things the way that they did in the 80s and 90s and expect the results that we're going to get today.
Right.
And that's a whole different podcast.
100%. Yeah, that's a conversation I'd love to have with you at another time. But yeah.
And so it's like I've got a couple younger men right now in their 30s that when they are struggling, I'm the first call that they make. And that's what the church community can do. When I go back to your question, your advice is, get connected to a church and develop relationships. It can only just be one.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to tell your junk to 5 and 10 people. There just needs to be 1 to 2 people that you can trust. And I can truly say that I have 3 guys that I can call at any time. 2 of them live here in Knoxville. 1 lives in Birmingham. If I call them, they will be on my doorstep in a matter of either 30 minutes or within 2.5. I think it's a 3-hour drive from Birmingham.
Yeah.
And that's how I try to model being a pastor. Now, I can't do that for all of the members at our church, but that's what we teach. That's what we train. That's what we model. Yeah. And there's even a couple closer friends that I've developed as being a pastor that I'm a big mentor in their life, being a pastor here. And it's been a neat phase of my life that I'm in, being able to speak into people's life in that capacity to say, hey, this is the best benefit. This is the best value. Because at the end of the day, and I would say this to you, because what does success look like? And because I know part of the podcast is designed around some success.
Achieving success with a thriving faith and family. Yeah.
You know, what that looks like. But for me, at the end of the day, you know, I'm 55. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I don't know. I feel like I'm a young 55 most of the time.
I never would have guessed you in your 50s.
Oh, thank you. But at the end of the day, let's say, I don't know, I'm 75, 80, 85, 90 on my deathbed. Really what matters to me the most and what success looks like to me is I'm on my deathbed. I don't know, I've got a sickness, or I'm just old and it's time to die. I'm laying there in my bed, and the only people that I want standing around me is my children and their children.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't want anybody else.
Yeah.
Because if I model friendship and fatherhood to where my kids want to be with me, then that is success.
That's good. Amen. I love that. Love that. Thanks so much, Tim. Guys, listen, you've been just had so many just truth bombs dropped today, and a lot of fun conversation with Tim here, from the pastor of Juniper Church, who leads Juniper worldwide, and Chef Tim, who's going to be on that cooking show on January 28th. And what's the name of that again, Tim?
Next Level Chef.
Next Level Chef with Gordon Ramsay. Tim, I'm grateful for you, man. Thank you for coming on here. And to our listeners, thank you all so much for just continuing to listen and support the podcast. Don't forget that community he's talking about. You can definitely and should definitely find it in a local church. But maybe you're a person who's not connected to a church right now. Maybe it's something that you're not ready to go back to because there's church hurt, or there's some misunderstanding of what church is, and you want to find a good church. A great place to start is the Men After God community on Facebook. And you can find us at facebook.com/groups/Men After God. We got a great community of men in there that want to do just what we talked about in a minute ago, help you achieve success with a thriving faith and family. Make sure to give us a follow for the podcast, subscribe so you can get it weekly and get more great interviews just like the one you had today. And if there's ever any questions, you can always reach out to us via Facebook at facebook.com/Men After God podcast. We'd love to connect with you on there. Tim, thanks again, my friend. Such a wonderful interview with you. I can't wait to see you on Next Level Chef. There we go. I got it right that time. And I just look forward to following you and seeing what God does in your life, man. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
And guys, we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/Men After God. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.